You didn't see the militia in the streets. Now, people thought this was because of Mr. Musavi's participation. There had been a certain debate between the two candidates. Now, these discussions allowed us to see what was happening behind the scene, to see the truths that emerged after 30 years of oppression, and this was truly unprecedented. Now, more and more people were supporting Mr. Musavi. And then after the election, when it became clear that the election had been rigged, millions of people demonstrated and demanded their rights. Even at the United Nations, one could see that Mr. Ahmadinejad were no longer supporting him. And over the past few months, we have seen in Iran that certain horrible crimes perpetrated by the regime have come out. The electoral fraud that appeared. We've seen hate expressed by the people toward Mr. Neda, and we've seen that he has not kept his promises. We've noted a rising oppression by the regime that in fact dates back to the 31 years of the revolution. We've noted the inhuman and the cruel acts taken by the regime, which started the first day following the elections, when the results of the elections were announced. A great deal of pressure has built up once again, and which recalls the situation at the very beginning of the revolution. Now, Neda followed the campaign, and when the results of the election were announced, she realized that the elections had been rigged. And she joined the demonstrators, and she went out to demand her rights. Now, she hadn't voted, but she saw that circumstances had appeared where she had the right to demand certain rights, that mistakes had been made by the regime, and that this should be revealed to the world at large. She felt that this should be told. People had been arrested, tortured, murdered even. The regime had struck with a strong hand. There was a groundswell of sentiment in the people. Now, there was a new element. There was new technology. There were mobile phones. There was satellite. There was internet. All of these new means of technology could be tapped, could be harnessed to broadcast the terribly upsetting news coming from Iran. Now, the Guide of the revolution openly threatened the population and gave the order that the demonstrators should be put down. But nonetheless, people took to the streets again to demonstrate. And the mercenaries of the regime reacted against them and caused bloodshed. And I was an eyewitness to this. I was in the street. I was doing my job. I was trying to collect information and to report on it. And I saw firsthand, it's difficult to believe, but I saw firsthand that the army of the Guardian of the Revolution was shooting from a helicopter, was shooting and killing the demonstrators. Now, 4 days before this event, I had talked to Neda, and I had tried to dissuade her from demonstrating. I was in love with her. I didn't want her to be hurt. I knew that the regime was fighting for survival and that nothing would stop it. And I said to Neda, why do you want to go to demonstrate? She said, we have a responsibility we have to defend our rights. She said, you know, Caspian, I love you. You know I love being with you. But what is most important to me is the freedom of our people. And I said to her, and what if you're arrested? What will happen? And she said, nothing. And I said to her, what if you're shot at? And she said to me, even if a bullet hits my heart, it doesn't matter, because everyone will be marked. And on that great day, I left the head. I heard her having a conversation with her mother. Her mother wasn't able to turn her back, to talk her out of this. And at 6 o'clock on Saturday, the mercenaries of the regime did indeed shoot her to death and put a bullet in her heart. Now, there was footage of her last moments, and therefore the entire world was able to have a first-hand account of the tyranny of Iran. They saw an inhuman, a painful, horrible act that showed the black face of the regime. A young, innocent woman of 26 years was killed by a bullet in her heart. She was losing her blood, but she remained conscious. She was calm even at the end. Perhaps she was thinking of her final objective. She did not fight to stay alive. She gave herself up to death. Now, in the world, we've seen many people who have been wounded and killed, but this struck the world particularly hard. We were able to see on the footage how good and kind she was, and admire her attitude when faced with death, to admire her courage, which became a symbol of liberty, as she died hoping for a better life for the millions of Iranians who remained behind, and her wish for the gift of freedom for her people. Now, the world has experienced a great deal of progress. We have made headway in science and technology, and this has improved humanity. But we can wonder whether our spiritual depths have grown to the same extent that technology and science has developed. And I think that there's a clear answer here, and that answer is no. In terms of human rights, our progress has been very feeble. After thousands of years of history, we can see that mankind still treats each other in a very cruel way. We see that scientists spend colossal amounts of money and use a lot of time to make progress, to save lives, to